Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance.
Hey, welcome, Fearless. It's another Tactical Tuesday, and lots of messages over the last week and lots of discussions going on about last week's CMHC info. Today is part 2. Yes, it's more the nitty gritty. It's more the, programs, initiatives, what's available, all kind of more detail oriented rather than, what's the big picture. So pretty excited to have Sandie back on. I know lots of you guys just loved her presenting style and all that kind of stuff, the information. So get your seatbelts on, a little bit more nitty gritty today. So we're going to just couple quick things run through. So we're going to save the questions for at the end. So we're going to try and keep a flow of the information coming through. Please feel free to put your questions in or write them down. We will have time at the end for questions, but we're going to try and keep kind of a flow of the presentation so that we don't get too wrapped up in any one thing. So also at the end, we will have a little clarity bundle for you. So Sandie has graciously supplied this really awesome document that just kind of shows us really clearly some of the stuff that we need to know in accessing these programs, because there are a lot of them. So stick around for that for sure. And say where you're from, guys. This is a national program that Sandie works with. So this is, there we go. Sean's from Whitby. Perfect. The Flomo. Perfect, Ryan. I like it. Okay, another Whitby. There we go. Chris. Hey, Chris. Mississauga, Cape Breton. Awesome. Edmonton. Looking forward to this all week. Hey, Karina. Yeah, it's lots of good stuff. And just so you know, we are figuring out how we're going to kind of triage if there are questions. So we will have a reach out for you. We will have a way for you to do that, but we want to get the information out there first and see what we need to do from there to get everyone all the information, all the programs, all the contacts that they need. Alrighty, St. Albert, Ottawa. Hey, Sylvie. Sylvie, there's some awesome programs for already existing housing and turning them and keeping them at that affordable level, and the programs and incentives to do that and how to make it still profitable. So I was thinking about you guys actually. So anyways, Montreal, awesome. Hey, Craig and Lisa. Okay, so guys, let's bring Sandie on. We again feel free to put your questions in. We might just have to keep them till the end, and you might have to remind me what they are if I don't get them all down. But we're going to get rolling because we got lots of information to get through. So, hey, Sandie.
Hey, how are you?
Great. Excited. Everyone's excited to get you back.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully we don't disappoint here. I was working right up to the wire, as you know, trying to make sure that I anticipated as many of the questions and needs that you guys might have and figuring it out. I know it's not the format you typically do by having a bit of a presentation, but because there's a lot of information, I think it's probably easiest if we kind of do some slide sharing and I'll talk a bit about programs. And then I know there'll be lots of time at the end. I didn't overwhelm the presentation, so I know that there'll be time for some questions and some engagement and to have that chit chat afterwards. So I'm joining from Edmonton. I just had somebody say, "Hey, you look familiar." Hopefully that was from last week, or maybe it's from real life. You never know. Like back when we were allowed.
It's Ryan, and you can just pretty much ignore half of what Ryan says because he's rarely serious, although he is in St. John, New Brunswick, and he's doing some crazy great stuff with bringing some of these really old buildings, really old area, and bringing them up to the beautiful standard for rentals. So I have a feeling, yeah, he's going to be part of our little program here. But anyways,
Awesome. So I'm
okay,
just gonna mess up that I'm gonna let you drive slides. So if it seems a bit clunky, guys, it's just because I'm gonna ask Tiff to hit forward for me so that I can consult notes when I need to. But
yes, let me just get my branding stuff out of the way here so that we can actually
thank you.
see.
I appreciate that, because
There.
some of my slides are heavy and they go the whole thing. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about some programs. And this came from a conversation you and I had where you said that, you might be familiar with some of our mortgage insurance programs, but you didn't know what the National Housing Strategy was. And we really wanted to make sure that we gave you a little bit of what is the National Housing Strategy. So last time we set that stage by talking about why do we talk about affordability? Why is it important? Talking about the fact that, almost 2 million Canadians are living in core housing need and what that looks like, and defining affordability, and having some of those really great conversations with you guys. So today we're going to talk about how we seek to solve some of these challenges as a national crown corporation, an arm of the government, and see what we can do. So
yeah, which is awesome. So let me ask, guys, of you that are on, there's just over 60 of you on right now at this point.
Mhm.
It will grow as we're on longer.
Yeah.
How many of you guys have heard of the National Housing Strategy that CMHC is implementing? It's a massive program, $70 billion program. Is that right?
Yeah. And more. Yeah. Often there's more money invested. That's what it was when it was launched. That's what it was $70 million. Yeah, $70 billion.
Yeah.
So it's huge every single year. It's massive amounts of investment in the sector to try to ensure, as the next slide will show you, if you wanted to advance it to the next one, so that we can. Oh, you wanted to see about that first? Sorry.
I'm just looking at some of the answers. So far we're like half and half.
Okay.
But interesting, that this is something that we absolutely can be taking part in as small investors, and yet, about half, more, it's looking at like more than half have never heard of it. Well,
yeah,
no, about half. Anyways, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about it. What is this?
So in 2017, we launched Canada's first ever national housing strategy. It surprised me that it didn't exist before that, but 2017. So that's like 5 years ago, because it was November, and it's called A Place to Call Home. And we launched it as a suite of products and services and research and innovation to help us achieve this big goal. So we also have a big, hairy, audacious goal that by 2030, everyone in Canada will have a home that they can afford and that meets their needs. And so that's what we're looking at as trying to achieve. So next slide. The National Housing Strategy is more than just a roof over our heads. It's also meant to include people and communities and partnerships. And you're going to hear that word partnerships a lot, because this vision is more than just that. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is we're going to see the National Housing Strategy as a toolkit. So it's not necessarily a program in itself. It's a toolkit with a whole bunch of complementary initiatives. As I mentioned, we have those research sides that we do, and solutions labs and different programs that we fund through even some other agencies and organizations. But today we're going to talk a lot more about some of our funding opportunities, and that's where we're going to go. So
and I love that, the word partnership that you've got in there, because that's really where we come in. Is you guys have this massive goal of providing housing for everyone by 2030. You can't do it alone, and so what you are doing is reaching out and saying, hey, we need partners, we need the big guys, we need the little guys, we need everyone. And so that's pretty exciting for all of us.
Exactly. I think it's important, though, to kind of back up and talk again about there are two streams under CMHC. And it's funny, we were just doing renovations in our home, and my home's about 45 years old. And we were tearing out some drywall in the bathroom. And I saw this, the plastic film, that you have on exterior walls, and it said CMHC on it. Right. And I laughed because, that's the sort of thing that people think about. They think about the mortgage insurance we as homeowners have to have. When we can't put a significant down payment down on our homes. Those of you in the sector as investors obviously probably encounter our mortgage insurance programs, just because we're really the only game in town typically. But we also, so that's the left side. So that's one side of CMHC. That's actually where we make our money, that help offset the other programs, to be honest, right? That also are invested through government as well. And so on the left side, the mortgage loan insurance, we're not the lenders. So you're going to hear that a lot. We are not the lender. So we just sometimes, there's a whole branch that I don't work in that talk about how those programs are implemented and work with the financial institutions and the regulators to get those off the ground. Where we, on the other side, under the National Housing Strategy, is where we are the lenders. So we are the underwriters. So that's where we're going to focus most of our energy today, is talking about those direct lending and the NHS programs.
Okay, so let me really clarify this, because this is a huge point in being able to access the different parts of CMHC. So there is, guys, we've heard of MLI Select, and we've heard of the predecessors to that and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, we're familiar with those lending products. That's who you're going to talk to your mortgage broker about. If you need a mortgage broker to talk to about details on that, we can certainly provide you one. So that is where, you know, they are brokering a deal with another lender, but CMHC is going to insure it for a price. That also, that money then goes to helping the other side, which is what we're going to talk about today. And that other side is under that umbrella of the National Housing Strategy. And that's what we're going to put our time and energy into today, because here's the thing. You can get information on MLI Select from a host of other people, Sean Impey, Sean Sullivan among them, within our group right here. So you can get information from them on MLI Select. You won't get information on the National Housing Strategy from anyone except for people like Sandie and her team. So that's what we're going to focus on today. That is on the right-hand side of your screen, if you're looking at it the same way I am, where it's direct lending. And again, that's where they are the lender. You're not going to a bank. They are the lender. So, and it's programs through that. Perfect. Okay.
Exactly. The next slide, I think, kind of shows that a little bit more, because it talks about the different programs and offerings that we have and how they fit into different phases of development, because they span the full housing development to pre-development to project stabilization. You know, so everything, as you can see, this is a really handy chart that talks about some of the different programs. Today, we're going to talk about seed funding, the National Co-Investment Fund, the rental construction financing. And even though I'm not the expert on the MLI, I will do a really high level introduction, especially to Select, just because it is new and it is very exciting. So I will touch on it, but this is kind of an overview slide of all the different programs we have. And on the next one, it talks about just some of the general criteria when we think about our programs, whether they be even the MLI, but definitely under the National Housing Strategy. All of our programs in the general sense follow this prioritization criteria. So they include 5 or more units, you know, to access. So it's not for single family housing, like one-ofs, okay? We want to, you know, serve first those populations that need housing first. So the people that are we call them priority populations, and we have identified them. We talked about them a little bit last time. We also, most of our all of our programs have varying different degrees of depth and duration in regards to affordability, you know, ranging from 10 years to 20 years, that sort of thing. And it'll make sense a bit more in a second. We want to know that where you're building it will have access to amenities to those tenants that are going to be living in there. And that's actually a really good place. We're going to be talking pretty much about rental housing at this point. And maybe in our Q&A, we can talk about some of that other stuff that you're hearing buzzwords around, like rent to own and stuff like that. But we want to know that the tenants that are living in your builds, in your projects, have access to amenities. So if it's for families, is there school nearby? Is there transit nearby? Is there grocery? You know, like, we don't want to put people in, you know, an amenity desert, for example, and say that, hey, we've provided them housing. We have certain accessibility features that we want to make sure are part of our builds as well, and support energy efficiency goals, which I know is super important to a lot of your members as well as us. And these criteria are minimums. You know, borrowers are also rewarded for exceeding those, and you'll see that as we go through some of the different programs. And so, yeah, I was going to start with seed funding.
So okay, so one sec. Let me just kind of go back to really quick, just for those of you that missed part 1. You you do have access to the replay from last week, but I
Yeah.
want to just really clearly say that, a lot of times when we as investors hear affordable housing, it freaks us out for a couple of reasons. And one is, generally speaking, we think, well, then it's not profitable. And what Sandie's showing us is the incentives and the funding and the grants and the, different incentives and programs make it so that it is. So don't just write it off right away. Secondly, we also think of a tough tenant demographic. And those who've watched us for a while, we really believe in selecting your tenant demographic before you select your property. So just to be really clear, she's not talking about, some of the social program housing for the homeless or those that are, in maybe more difficulty. We're talking about those single moms out there, maybe, people new to Canada, whatever, people that need that hand up, not hand out. And so that's who we're talking about. So when Sandie's talking about these initiatives being intended for this priority population, that is within that. Okay, so don't get too scared about I can't handle the tenant demographic, because it's not what you're thinking. And go back and watch last week's to kind of find that out a little bit more. But yeah, this is great stuff, Sandie. Super clear. I love it. This is exactly the prioritizing criteria. So if we as investors want to access these programs, the more of these things we hit, the more availability of these programs we'll have. Yes?
Exactly, because all of our programs are scored, and you'll see that in a second. So we score things. So the closer you are to those amenities, the higher your rank and your score will be. The deeper your energy efficiencies, the higher your score will be. Okay, so that's how we work that. So if we're going to talk about seed funding, because this is kind of a neat one that I don't think we're starting to see some pickup with this with the larger REITs, where they're stacking this with some of their MLI programs to assess whether or not they may want to, what type of renter they might be looking that might need a bit more affordability. So seed funding is for pre-development, and it's, especially as it says here, helpful when you have a complex project that might include many partners, work with the community, or if you're dealing with a difficult redevelopment. So seed funding is intended, and you're going to see like a huge list in a couple slides here of some of those pre-development activities. So it could be doing a needs and demand survey, analysis, just to see, is this type of housing needed, and who's it for? It might be to develop those partnerships that you might want to access with maybe a community housing provider or another level, like a level of government, to be able to be a partner in that sort of thing. So
you're saying they will actually fund the research in order to see if there's something that can be done, because that too is a concern, is that we, as investors, we are usually wearing many hats, as as a that we don't have a lot of extra time. And so what you're saying is, well, there's programs that say, listen, let's look into this, but you can't do it all either, and we will together make it happen so that there's actually available funding or whatever it might be.
That's right.
That's amazing.
That's right, because like there can be a combination. If you go to the next slide, you'll see of between a loan and a contribution of up to $500,000 per project. So that's a significant investment and can really reduce per door costs when you're thinking about how am I going to partner with that group that maybe supports people with disabilities and rent them like a block of units in my build, right? So that so some of those planning costs. It also works now too for when there are units, that existing affordable units that are at risk of being lost. So you can use it for some repair and renovations to like maybe fund the building condition assessment or things like that. So the combination of loan and contribution is determined when you apply. We typically want to see, for applications for seed, we want to see land, and a general, like you can't just come in with like a complete, just an idea. Like it has to be a little more formed than that. But those are the conversations I have with you before I put you with one of our application specialists. And then we determine what is the best complement. And the contribution will vary depending on who's applying. So we have a scale based on, so the nonprofit sector can apply for a higher percentage of the approved funding, but as the private sector, you can apply for up to 15% of the approved funding to a maximum of $75,000. And we see these approved. Like, this isn't something like, if you've got a viable project, I know I have for-profit developers that are using this. If you decide to get into partnership, and I'll entice you in the next program a little bit more with partnership, and maybe you do your funding complement, like your partnership agreement, where maybe the nonprofit is in the 51% and you guys are in a lesser, level of the partnership, up to 40% of the approved funding could be accessed, in contributions. So we definitely prioritize, I won't lie, we definitely prioritize nonprofits, Indigenous groups, co-ops, and even municipalities and things like that. But we do still recognize that the private sector is a big player in this.
Okay, so to me, this is like, I'm just looking at this slide right now, and non-repayable contribution of up to 150, interest-free loan of up to. So this is free money.
Could be, yeah.
As long as it fits some of the things that we've already talked about, some of these things, all of them, some of them, whatever it might be, a combination of them. But the overall thought is, now we can see as investors that if we have interest-free loans versus, loans obviously that we're paying interest on, if we have, grant money, non-repayable contributions, grant money, basically, for some of the down payment, we're no longer paying a private lender on, or paying whatever it might be that we're doing. We can see how those numbers could change. And what I hope to do after this is actually create a case study to be able to show the comparison.
Exactly.
But you guys, you can see how when there's these programs out there, now all of a sudden becoming an affordable landlord, and not all of it, just in even some of your units, becomes a lot more doable when you realize that there's all these incentives. So if we ran the numbers and then said, okay, now you want me to offer 30% off of the rents, well, it doesn't make sense to us. But when we run the numbers looking at all these extra perks, it actually does make sense in a lot of ways. And so now we can start, opening our mind to these possibilities. So pretty darn exciting, right? Game changer. I know, really.
Exactly. And I mean, you can see on the next slide that there's like the eligible activities run the gamut. Like, it's everything. I'm not going to list them, but it's everything from, doing your energy analysis to business plans, to those articles of incorporation if you are entering into a partnership, or like a joint venture, that sort of thing. So there's a lot that you can do with that. So seed funding is what we call it. It's like our phase one pre-construction costs, and so this isn't something like this. Is, you want to start thinking about your projects well ahead so that we can get these advancing. As we start moving to the next product that I wanted to talk to you about, the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, you'll see that you can layer in some of those activities to help you access this particular program. Like, so you could be really targeted with some of the activities that you undertake under seed in that pre-development in order to help your success with this program. Because this is the flagship program. And it provides low-cost loans and financial contributions to attract those partnerships and investments. And it has two streams. So there's the new construction, obviously, of new affordable housing stock, but it also has a repair and renewal of existing community and affordable housing to make them more sustainable from that, like, community, financial, and environmental perspective. And we're significantly invested in the idea of that repair and renewal of existing stock. So if you wanted to consider, like purchasing, like, I know, like, different provinces have different mandates around divesting themselves of their publicly held stock. Like, I know in my province of Alberta right now, that's a hot topic, is what's going to be happening. And there's going to be a lot of housing that's going to go on the market. And how do we make that something that you might want to invest in, is by saying, well, maybe if these units need some repairs and renewals, I can access the co-investment fund repair and renewal stream to help finance that, because we want to keep those units. So it's not just about the new units added. We would be useless if we didn't maintain. Like, we have to maintain what we have and add new. So it's a twofold project. So that's what we're working The next slide kind of talks about some of those, like who and what type of project. Again, I'm not going to list everything here, but you can again see on the left-hand side, like you can see that you're represented there with the private entrepreneurs, builders, and developers, and also partnerships of any combination on that side are really, really the goal here. And projects can run, again, on the other side of what it could look like. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that a little bit, just because I know that is, I've saw a couple questions now, but I also know that that's a little bit, so we use partnerships in a different, not different actually, but in a connotation of, let's say, I wanted to buy a property and I come to you, Sandie, and I'm like, hey, there's this great property for, we can cash flow $500 a month, let's say. And you go, I don't know anything about real estate investing. I don't even know how to run those numbers. And I hate being a landlord. So I come to you and say, well, that's what I'm here for. I'll manage it. I'll do all the work. You put in the money and we'll split profits. So that's what we go into as joint venture partnerships.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that you guys also like partnerships, and there's many different mixes of how that can look, guys. So I saw a question of, is this a joint venture partnership or a partnership with community organizations? This slide here, guys, take a picture of it.
Yeah.
Lots of mix, right? Like this can be, you can be partnering with a municipality, you can be partnering with a nonprofit, you can be partnering with a builder.
Yeah.
Indigenous, you can be partnering with, maybe you're the nonprofit has the people that need the housing, then you're the developer builder, or maybe you operate it and manage it after, or maybe you do both of those things. There's different ways that you can do it, and all of these opportunities are a way to partner, a segment of.
Exactly. And the projects also run the gamut. I mean, I know some of these aren't in your personal risk appetites, shelters and transitional, but, obviously there are a lot of other different types of things that we're talking about. And as we move into like the financial viability piece, you'll see that we want to see builds that include those partnerships, that also include not only a mixed group of tenancy in order to be financially viable, but also, different types of renters, but also maybe some commercial things like that. So you'll see that in the next slide. But partnerships are central. Like to access this fund, you actually have to be in partnership of some level. It used to be that we used to say that you had to be in partnership with another level of government, but we don't say that any longer. There does need to be some government buy-in, so we need to be building housing that your actual region, your municipality or province or whatever it might be needs, but in order to access this. But we don't necessarily expect that the province or your municipality will kick in actual cash. It could be private investors working with a nonprofit, that sort of stuff. So it's just, a partnership of some level. And then that structure is how you work it. So I'm
just going to throw a couple of these. Sean Sullivan. So this is one of the mortgage brokers that we work with, and he's an investor himself, and this is the person you would talk to about the MLI select products, that sort of thing. And he's saying, I'm in. Like, I'm all in to do this. I want to make this happen. Lease us out east. Like, it's out there. And it's just awesome because there's so many opportunities for us that we didn't know about. So I'm so happy to have you. Thank you.
I'm going to go through the next couple slides quicker because I think that they kind of all go into one another. So I'm going to go through them, and then maybe we can, if we have to follow up with them afterwards. But, again, we have these kind of minimum eligibility requirements for the co-investment fund. So we talk about those social outcomes again, so, and we score them, so addressing, remember we talked about those prioritization criteria. So those are those social outcomes. Okay. But in terms of minimum requirements, we are talking 5 units. So always, and they don't have to be in the same building. They don't even actually have to be in the same town if you're talking about small municipalities, right? And we also allow for up to 30% non-residential in the co-investment fund, which is significant. And that, honestly, that is the way to go if you're looking at a build to achieve, great financial viability. So we want to see that 30%. Yeah.
Sorry. Tell me, why is that significant? And what does that mean that it doesn't have to be residential?
So that means that you could lease out maybe your podium level, like your main floor, to a coffee shop or a daycare, or in smaller communities, we see actually partnering with municipal amenities. We have like a city hall on the main floor, and then residential workforce housing for a resort town up top. We see, I've seen libraries, I've seen senior centers, even the nonprofits are doing this. What they're doing is they're like the YWCA is having, you know, like the Y services, like the things, the program space that they need on the main level in their office spacing, and then putting residential above. So up to 30% is quite good, and it really helps increase your financial viability, because we're going to need you to demonstrate that you have that financial and operational capability to sustain the project for the duration of the term. And so, and that you know, can support like cost overruns and delays. So I want to talk more about affordability, because I think that freaks people out. So the co-investment, I want to kind of see if I can break it down.
Yeah.
So
That's why I just love talking to you, because you get it.
Yeah. So the affordability piece for the co-investment fund, okay, and this will vary with other programs. We use a term called median market rent for your area or lower. Okay. So we want to say that at least 30% of the units must be at 80%, you know, so a 20% discount, okay, off of median market rent for your area. And you can access what is median market rent on that housing market portal that I link later, but we talked about it last time. And you can see in big CMAs, like in big cities, it'll get broken down by neighborhood for you. In smaller communities, it might just be the town or the region, or you can take your closest one, or you can actually get that information from municipal governments as well. And so we want to see that 30% of the units. So that means you have 70% of your units that you can have at market to help offset the costs of those ones that you're doing a deep affordability to. And one of the reasons that we're talking about trying to entice you to the deeper affordability is because that's where the vast majority of housing is needed. We have found across the country, now it'll vary from region to region, but like it really honestly will. But in many regions in the country, we don't need as many market rents. Like, you know, I think our vacancy rate in Edmonton is something like 16% or something like that, right? And there's like almost 5,000 rental units in construction right now in Edmonton.
Yeah.
So, but yet we have that high vacancy rate, but yet we have huge waiting lists. Like 5,000 people are sitting on a waiting list for affordable housing. Those are people that need their rents to be at this 80% of median market rent. They're, you know, they can't pay market, and they can't even pay like near market, which is usually about 15% off. So this is where we want to do that. The co-investment fund also has this, and this can be a bit scary for people, but we want to maintain these units, is we want that 20-year commitment on this fund. This is one of the things that we ask to be able to get you those really great interest rates and to those incentives and the potential for contributions and things like that, is we ask for you to, these units have to be held for 20 years. And so that's a significant, I know, investment, but it is important to it. And then just other things. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So as you know, okay, really quick. As you know, I've said that will freak out a lot of investors, and you've said that there's even, you know, ways that can be, and we can't get into it today, obviously, for time, but that can be circumvented as well in the numbers, in the grants, in the interest rate things, all of that, so that kind of stuff can make sense. So that even if you had to sell it to the next buyer, and they're going to be freaked out a bit, there's that incentive. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, okay, exactly. Awesome.
Okay. And then energy efficiency. This isn't something I usually have to sell to private developers. You guys are usually pretty good, but we're going to be looking at, like if you're looking at the 25% is off the 2015 code. I actually should probably update this, because most people are using at least 2017, which we ask for a 15% reduction from the 2017 code. If you're doing renovations and repairs, we just want to see a 25% decrease in that base case pre-forma, like from what it was before. Accessibility. For the co-investment fund, we do ask for new construction that 20% of your units must meet or exceed accessibility standards, or you could use full universal design. And we have guidelines in place to show you what that will look like.
And so just to be really clear, accessibility, when we're talking about that, it's so that those units can be accessed by people with disabilities, wheelchair, wider doors, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that sort of stuff.
Simple.
And obviously, if you want to do universal design, we'll be like really stoked. So
I don't know what that is.
So universal design is like, it's like a base pro forma. That's actually, you might want to consider having somebody come in and do a presentation to you on universal design, because it removes some of the barriers and access. It doesn't mean that things have to be 100% accessible, like with bars and stuff, but that it can be easily changed to include those things when needed, but that you've put some thought into things like, paint colors and widening of doorways and making, your buildings visitable and also have the potential to become accessible.
I love it. Okay.
So yeah, that's a whole other presentation. So
yeah, I like it.
Yeah. So on the next slide, you can see it again. We're talking about a combination of repayable loans and or forgivable loans, depending on the needs of the project and that level of achievement, because you are scored on those. Okay. So, but the repayable loans are on 10-year terms with a fixed interest rate that's locked in at the first advance. It's usually like better than what you're going to get at a bank, like quite a bit. We don't quote them at this point, but like they're low, like they're quite good. You can get up to.
Let's just stop and say, remember, this is when CMHC is not insuring the mortgage. They are.
We are your lender.
Yeah.
And because we are a large scale lender, we can offer those kind of discounts. When you're meeting our needs, we scratch your back, you scratch our back, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, right.
We have up to a 50-year amortization, so that's your smaller monthly payments, longer term viability. As a private sector borrower, you can access up to a 75% loan to cost. Okay, so LTC. But this is where partnerships are. I'm going to push that again, because a nonprofit can finance up to 95% LTC for their residential and 75% for their non-residential. So this again is where those partnerships really shine. Yeah. So repayable loans are considered as the first option. We kick in those contribution amounts often. To get a project over the finish line, especially if you're wowing us with those things like, your amount of affordability and your accessibility and your energy efficiency and stuff like that. But we also, again, sometimes have what we call carve-outs, contribution carve-outs for certain populations. I think a few weeks ago, the minister announced some incentives for Black Canadian households, like providing housing for Black Canadians. And I don't know the program particulars of that yet. It's coming in the next few weeks. It'll be announced. Mm-hmm. But from time to time, we have certain carve-outs that support particular groups or shelter initiatives and things like that. So
and let me just say too, one thing we've talked about in the last few weeks too is that even for minority population as investors, developers, builders, there are, so if you are of minority population and you want to be a developer or a builder or whatever, you can access more funding than maybe someone else could, because they want to push for this inclusiveness. And so again, another beautiful program that we didn't know existed that we could be taking advantage of, some of us.
Exactly. We've identified some populations, especially like for Black Canadian households and to builders and developers. So specifically, if you do fall into that category, keep me in mind, and that's something that we can talk about as well. So
sorry, okay. Can I just ask you one question?
Yeah, you're never going to get through this deck. You know that, right? Like,
I should just let you go. I just want to get to one question, because I've seen it 4 times now, and so I feel like if it might be a mind block. Is the land cost included in these calculations?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good. Perfect.
Yeah.
Moving on.
And you'll see that in a second. Yeah. Because by the time you're doing a co-investment application, obviously you have your land, you probably have permits. Like, looking at these requirements, these are the things. I'm not going to go through them, but like you have all these sorts of requirements, like fit. But what's really cool is on the next slide is this handy tool. And you can access this tomorrow if you wanted to, or later today on our website. So if you just Googled CMHC co-investment fund and just go through the resources, you'll see that there is this financial viability assessment calculator, and it's a fill outable like Excel workbook kind of thing where you can number crunch and play. Like you're not held to anything. You don't have to sign up for an account. You don't have to do anything. You can just play with this calculator. It's really tiny, obviously here,
Beautiful.
but it's a place that you can start, doing some number crunching and things like that. So
okay, and it was again, what do we Google one more time?
You'll Google exactly what I Google, which is CMHC co-investment fund, and then you can, there's resources there. So just there's a menu on the bottom that says resources, and you'll see this assessment calculator. You'll see all the like how to apply, documentation checklists, the requirements, all sorts of stuff. And they're always these processes are always being updated because we're known to be a little bit cumbersome, I won't lie. And so we've been streamlining a lot of our processes, and there's more coming. Like there's more process improvements that I know are coming. So we're constantly evolving how our application process. So if you had experience 5 years ago, or like, especially when the housing strategy was first announced to now, I implore you to try again, because maybe it's gotten better for you. And we're constantly trying to update and make those things better.
Amazing.
So I'm just going to touch on one other product here. And this is one actually I'm going to full on fess up. I don't talk about a lot because in my region, in the prairies, we don't do a lot with this particular fund anymore. We had a few projects that are in the completion, like they're in the rent up stage right now in Calgary, and I think in Fort Saskatchewan, and I think there was one in Manitoba. But in other regions of the country, RCFI is what we call it, is a hotter commodity. So it targets that kind of middle-class Canadians by financing projects that are financially viable without ongoing operating subsidies. So again, ongoing operating subsidies are when maybe your province kicks in money to support those populations that are living in your place. So this is just for rental housing, and it provides both direct lending and insurance. And so it provides low-cost loans to encourage the construction and supports those sustainable apartment projects in areas where there's a need for rental supply. And again, it's more regional or stakeholder focused. I believe there was some announcements around co-ops in this particular fund. Like, so there's different things that are happening around that. So this is something to keep an eye on. On the next slide, you can see like it funds standard apartments. It's not to support retirement homes or single room occupancy things or student housing. And, it offers like 10-year terms with one low interest rates, 50-year amortization. We saw lots of large scale real estate investors access this program across the country. Nice. Some of you may have even yourselves. So there's a lot. Again, after 10 years, your loans transfer to an approved lender for renewal. So we start off as your lender, as your underwriter, but then we move on. And so it's meant to stimulate the rental housing construction center, and is compatible with, different local affordable housing programs or initiatives and those incentives, again, with higher outcomes. So I'm not going to get too specific into it because I did want to kind of get through a couple other, the mortgage insurance ones for you.
Yep.
Okay. So
I'm holding my questions. Can you tell?
Yes. And I'm going to ask you, actually, let's hold the questions for like until the MLI, like until I've done the mortgage loan. And then, because then we'll have that good 10 minutes. I can just ramble on. Because again, I'm not your only source for mortgage loan insurance. My knowledge is really high level. I bring it as an add-on to the other programs, not as a standalone. Typically, we have specialties because you can stack most of our programs. That's what's also cool. So you can stack seed, obviously, with pretty much any of them. And you can stack seed with our mortgage insurance programs. You can stack, co-investment and mortgage loan insurance too. Like, so there can be a bunch of different ways of financing your projects. Okay. But we are Canada's only provider of mortgage loan insurance for multi-residential properties. It's that commercial product, as I said, it's some way, it provides those preferred interest rates, lower borrowing costs for construction, purchase, renewal, refinance of residential properties, and facilitates those renewals through the life of a mortgage. So actually you can skip 2 slides to that one with all the little colored squares. So what you get by coming to CMHC for mortgage loan insurance is, that flexibility in financing. You can get higher loan to value. Now we're talking loan to value, not loan to cost. Loan to value ratios, providing larger loan amounts. You get lower interest rates, again, because typically we are very competitive. Guaranteed renewals, they're facilitated for the life of your mortgage. We have those premium credits, for refinance of projects that are already insured with us. So those premium credits, recovery of our CMHC fees and underwriting fees. So those premium things, and the next slide kind of shows you that typically within about 5 years, under 5 years, you recoup any of your costs. So you hit your return on equity a lot faster. Which is the next one. There are tax benefits, like our underwriting fees and insurance premiums are deductible expenses from your rental income, and insurance is covered for the life of the mortgage. So I brought this next slide, not that I can sit here and parse through and explain it, but because you're going to get this deck and you probably understand this 1,000 times better than I do. But I had this shown to me recently at a presentation, and I thought, okay, that makes sense. But it's showing that even when you take out a higher loan to value mortgage, and you think, oh, I'm going to have to pay higher premiums and higher fees and things like that, you actually return your return on equity comes at a greater rate and it's achieved higher. So I don't think people always see that. And so I thought this was a neat slide to kind of show you.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, and so we have straight mortgage loan insurance, and then we have what is called Mortgage Loan Insurance Select, which was just recently, it's a new designed product. It was replacing, some of you might be familiar with MLI Flex. This has replaced that product to drive deeper social outcomes while offering choice and flexibilities. And it's focused on 3 key areas: affordability, because that's our number one game, climate compatibility, and accessibility. Next slide. So it doesn't matter. This one, you can go back. Go with my pig. I like him. He's cute. So, so you have the option of choosing, just affordability, just climate change, stacking affordability and climatability, and using accessibility to get you over the hump into the next incentive. You could do all 3. So the more significant the commitment, the more flexibilities that are available. And this choice offering is designed to maximize your outcomes with balancing fiscal realities and challenges that you may have in different markets and as such. So it has this point system. And these incentives are available for both new construction and that purchase or refinance. And again, just to reinforce, the more committed you are to these outcomes, the better the incentives. So what does that look like? So looking at, this is new construction. These charts, as well as all this information, can be found by just literally Googling MLI Select, and they have these charts and they're print-outable. Okay, nice. So I've just copied, I've just screen capped them and inserted them. And I just did the new construction. Okay, so remember last time I talked about with co-investment that we were using a calculation called median market rent. Right, where 30% of the units need to be at 80% of median market rent for that area. For MLI Select, we use a different calculator. We use one called median renter income, so the MRI, okay? Because we found in our research that it was more representative of the income profile of Canadians living in rental units, roughly representing the upper income level where core housing needs tend to occur. So those people riding the cusp. So those ones that are at the greatest risk of experiencing being underhoused, paying too much for their rent, or living in substandard housing, right? Yep. So we found that by using median renter income for this calculation, we're able to increase the number of affordable units for those in greatest need. So nationally, the MRI is about 40 to 50,000. Okay. It'll depend, in some regions, Alberta has a higher MRI than the national average. We're sitting in our two main cities in around that 67 to 68,000.
Okay.
But large cities like Toronto, like different regions of Toronto and Vancouver are well within this 40 to 50. So that gives you some calculations. As you can see by this affordability kind of chart, you can see the buy-in is as low as 10% of the units. So whereas we saw 30% in co-investment, this could be as low as 10% of the units. And the time commitment is 10 years compared to that 20 years, right? So the buy-in, and for that, you would get 50 points. Okay. So in regions where higher vacancy rates and higher than average MRI, like I keep talking about in Alberta, we also might want to consider deepening some of these, and you can do that because you have the ability and flexibility, because rents are, you take what your the appetite in your region is, and you can find out what that median renter income is on that website as well.
Okay,
so
nice.
In regards to climate, obviously this is a huge priority for both the Government of Canada and CMHC. And we just hired our first Chief Climate Officer. And so climate commitments are included in this product. And we're getting a lot of pickup on this from especially the real estate developers like yourself, who are very interested in also building green. And so so you'll see here that we're asking for, I believe it's a minimum of 20% better than the 2017. So in co-investment, this is actually where it exceeds what we were asking for in co-investment, which was 15% off 2017. So that's what we're looking at. And again, for purchase or refinance, it's a reduction based on the base case. So you'll see that is in there. And then accessibility, I'm not going to get too far into that, but again, this is a place to lower. You obviously, you won't meet any really great scoring outcomes that you're going to see by just doing accessibility, but it's a great place to get you over that hump and into the next incentive. So what does that look like? Next slide. Scoring. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like this. Like, it shows you that, you can get those 50 points. And if you did just 50 points, you would have a premium of 2.5%, right? If you wanted to add in where you're going to hit 20% above code, the 2017 code, you'd get another 30 points. So then all of a sudden you're looking at 2% and, different loan to costs. So again, this is language you guys speak, and your friend Sean would be able to parse through with you in greater detail. But I had to look up what recourse was. So I'm not your gal.
I love it. Yeah.
I'm not your gal to go through this, other than saying, like, holy cow, how cool is, I'm really excited about this. And because it is stackable. I think
I love the stackability part too, because generally speaking, it's like, I think about, coupons or whatever. It's like, oh no, only one promotion applies, right? But no, here you're saying, hey, if you qualify for all of them, then go for all of them. And that's pretty awesome.
Exactly. And so I've only got a couple of slides, and then we can open it up to all those kind of questions and ramble through. But
and don't worry about time too much. Like, if we go
over, so we run over a few minutes, that's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So the eligible loan, as you can see, I've already talked about that on the next slide, construction, improvements, purchase, refinance, and conversions, so there's lots of different things. And then just finally, I just wanted to kind of give you some idea of knowing your market. And this is your job, right? Like, I know you guys know this, but it did really strike me when I was doing some of the research in my own region. And when I heard that there's, 5,000 units of rental construction underway right now, like currently being built right now. And I'm wondering, like, how many of those are actually like affordable? And not many, not as much as there should be. So we ask, we're going to favor projects where there is the most demand. So, explore looking into things like, talking to your municipality. So when I have a for-profit developer and I have these conversations who say, I want to get in the affordable housing game. And one of the first things I will say to them, so you want to build in Calgary, then, have you talked to the municipality? What kind of data do they have? Because they'll be able to help you access things like, do they have an affordable housing strategy? Are there certain regions of their city or their town that they're looking at increasing supply? They can give you some of that data. They can also, tell you if there's wait lists for certain demographics that you might be interested in supporting, because it's entirely possible that what you think is out there in the market is actually not what's really needed. And unfortunately, then you said, and then I get those calls too. And even from big REITs, okay, like I won't name names, but I had a very, very large real estate investment trust company come to me last year because they were struggling filling units in a market. And because they didn't really consider that where they had built it wasn't where people needed to live. And I don't know why, but they took advantage of probably some construction boom or something like that and built it. And now they have empty units. So,
and that to me is one of the most exciting parts of this, is that right now, like you said, in the prairies and stuff, we've got housing, and we've got, people have a place to live if they want it, and they have the incomes to support that. Whereas it's those, different centers like Toronto, maybe Vancouver, whatever, all those centers where pricing, Halifax, gone crazy. And you're saying, well, then think about building in those. And that gives us an opportunity. Let's say that I want to invest in my backyard, but I live in Toronto. Well, this now opens a new opportunity for me to explore, to be able to do that. Whereas in Edmonton, I can just invest as a normal conventional investor and I'm going to be fine.
Exactly. And so there's some really great sources. Like I've talked about some of those, of where you can get some of the data. I know we talked about the housing market information portal last time, and I have that on the next page. There's like a screen cap of like the landing page that you can do, where you can put it right down to a community or like a neighborhood, but you can also do a municipality, and you can subset this data. Like there's all sorts of different layers and things that you can do. You can go to the municipalities and ask about need and demand studies. Talk to some of if you're in partnership, what are the wait lists looking like? Probably not going to do those shelter use count studies in the work that you guys are doing. Stats Canada, going and seeing what the demographics are, existing housing stock. And then also, I think it's really important, especially in smaller communities, is to talk to the people on the ground, like who is living there. Like small communities are people are chronically either underhoused or overhoused in small municipalities, because it's predominantly single family homes. And then they're wondering why they can't get workforce housing because people can't afford and or they don't want to live with 5 roommates. Right. And so, what is needed. And so as part of their economic development strategies, we're encouraging, and so are a lot of other groups, that municipalities undertake these housing strategies, like that they're looking at what type of housing do we need, what do we have, and for our growth projections, what are we looking at? So that's kind of big. And then I just
have to them and find out what they need, and then fill that need, just like we do with everything else that we do in real estate.
Exactly. And then just a summary thing, just to show you that, again, the types of funding that fit the different programs, so you can see that seed, flows through, MLI Select does, and where they kind of go through. So that's kind of, I ran through those last sections really fast, and I get that, but I wanted to make sure that, you've been keeping track of the questions, and I'm sure you have a million, because you're not used to being quiet through all these presentations.
Right? I'm not used to it for sure. My husband's laughing right now.
It's true. I know.
Yeah.
I get it. So I'll breathe for a minute and let you.
So your last slide says thank you, but let me just go back and say thank you, because the clarity, and there's so many questions, and guys, what we did say was that we're going to try and get to them at the end, but Sandie and I did talk about the fact that we may not be able to, and we may have to find another forum. Let me tell you, we have your questions. We will get them answered. Grant would love to have a copy of these slides.
Yeah, they're PDF. You can have those slides.
Yeah, she's totally fine with that. So that's great, Grant. I'll get them too. Don't worry. But at the end of the day, all of these questions, we can't possibly hit them. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to compile all the questions that you've put in, because we're not going to be able to hit them. I can guarantee you that. We're going to compile them all. We're going to get them to Sandie. We're going to find, a way to get them to you, whether that's in a document, perhaps it'll be in an ignited. We've talked about doing an ignited Q&A that we stream into Fearless so that everyone else can watch as well. We'll see how it all works best. But, a lot of the questions that are coming in, I wanted to address one of them that I saw, and I think it was Ali. Ali, you said that here's the problem with it. And I'll tell you that I agree. This was also, when I first started talking to Sandie, one of my biggest kind of mind blocks toward it. And it sounds like you've already been using some of CMHC's products, so that's great. But here's the thing, is with the parameters and the timelines and the restrictions that CMHC has on some of these things, yeah, is it more difficult for us? Like if we wanted to exit it? Yeah, it is. We've got to commit, guys. Like we've got to be all in. It's
a commitment.
It's a commitment. Yeah. And it's not like, we can go in and get some funding and be like, woohoo, got some free money. Yay. Now we're going to be, keeping it all. This is a social project. However, what I will say is that in talking to Sandie in more depth, again, that we can't get into, they're definitely aware of this. And it sounds like there are things coming that are going to kind of deal with some of the red tape around it, some of the timelines, commitments, that sort of thing, just so that, and it might not be in, there's forgiveness. Well, that would probably not make sense, but they're definitely, and I don't know if you guys can tell, but I've been in real estate for 18 years. CMHC has always kind of been a hard thing to crack. And Sandie's whole existence at CMHC is enabling that opening of those doors. So might it take some time? Absolutely, I think. But is that where they're headed? And do they now recognize that they need everyone's involvement, including us little guys? I sure am feeling that they do, and they are, and Sandie's very, and her whole team is, very committed to that. So yeah, is it a little tedious? Maybe. But can it be worth it? And can this be something that, is a social project for all of us that feel really strongly about it? I think so. I think it can bring really good stuff.
If we start to think of housing as essential infrastructure, like that's the biggest piece to this. Housing, and the National Housing Strategy, when it was introduced in 2017, saw this one piece of legislation that said housing is a basic human right, And so, we have that in our charter, that housing is a basic human right. And in other places around the world, like New Zealand, I believe it is, and maybe even Australia, they've adopted housing as essential infrastructure. So the fact that, so it's just the same as having, your sewer lines and and roadways and things like that. We don't prioritize one over another. So we're not saying, and you can see that governments are trying to do that, like when, when new governments are coming into power, municipal governments, and they're saying, well, the old government approved this infrastructure, but yet we have people living on the street here. Why are we building pedways when we should be doing this? And you can see them balking at it and trying to figure out ways around it. And I think it's just having those conversations to say, like, and the pandemic, really broke that wide open. Like, we don't succeed as a society unless we make sure that everyone's needs are being met. And we as a federal government are investing if we're going to invest our money, like pour money in, we're going to invest in those populations. That's where you see those heavily financed contribution only sort of deals coming through. So we need those partnerships where they can be to achieve the outcomes for, individuals through MLI Select, those ones that are living on the cusp, or that mom that has 3 jobs in order to put food on the table for her kids and a roof over their head, right?
Yeah, and has no choice but to leave her 10-year-old to babysit her 7-year-old because she can't pay for daycare, because that's the reality of what she's living in. And,
exactly.
And we know in this group that that's something that we want to be able to help. At the same time, this is funding our kids' futures and retirement. Some of us have no other retirement plan. So it has to be profitable. You guys get that. You understand that. You're okay with that, which again is kind of news to me, really. I've always thought of affordability housing meaning like it can't be. And yet, all of these initiatives are coming together, and,
nonprofits make money on housing. They just reinvest it. That's the difference, right?
Right.
Like a nonprofit housing provider still has to be financially viable and all their pro formas, like to qualify for our programs. And
Yes.
the difference is they reinvest their equity in more, right? Where, that they're not looking to pay, well, they still have to put a roof over their heads as a nonprofit typically, but that's the only difference. So how, like, these programs and initiatives have to make money in order to be sustainable and viable for the long term. So we get that.
Yes. Yeah.
And are we clunky? Yes. And it takes a long time to move a giant social mechanism, and
Yeah.
we're never going to see that investment that we saw post World War II, where you see a lot of where this housing came, where social housing came, right? Where there was hundreds and hundreds and thousands of units built across the country to say, here, people, have your housing. So,
Yeah.
and housing, it's not charity, it's a human right, right? Like, so we've just
Yeah.
got to kind of see that. Mhm.
Yeah. And remember that it's true. Oh, sorry. So yes, they are for 5 units and
5
more,
units.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. And you can see why that would make sense to the government of Canada that is, overseeing the whole entire country, that doing, one house at a time is really not going to change a whole ton. So
Mhm.
they've got to put their time, effort, and resources into those, that are going to have a bigger impact. So please, guys, remember to put your questions in the feed. We're going to go
Yes,
back through
and
this.
we can grab them.
Yeah, we're going to grab them. We're going to compile them. We're going to get them all together so that we can actually make sure that every single one of you get your questions answered. Check back in this feed, but also we'll probably put something here in Fearless just to make sure that everyone gets access to it.
Yeah.
Don't know exactly how that's going to look yet because it did go a little much, but guys, thank you for all the support. I love how engaged you guys are, and yeah, we're gonna get through this, and yes, we will share it, Julie, in one way or another. We're not exactly sure how we're going to do that yet. We don't want to inundate Sandie. But Julie.
But you also have that cool Bible that I sent you that you can send out too.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Julie, can you throw that
We
in?
call it the Bible.
You? That's so funny. Yeah, throw that in the chat, that PDF, if you don't mind, and we'll also make it available in Fearless, you guys. So, all right. So let's cut it here. Thank you, Sandie. We got through it. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
So good job. Thank you so much. And you and I will be in touch so that we can figure out a way to make sure that there's even more clarity. But even just that, okay, so you're calling it the Bible. So that little manual or
housing solutions table. It basically has all these programs and it breaks it down as to how many units, how the programs work, and it's all of them, including the MLIs. So
perfect. And there it is, guys. You can see Jules.
Literally
nice.
updated March 2022. So it's brand new.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, perfect. So, and that table just was, I was looking through it and I'm just like, oh, this is just so clear. It was.
I use it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, guys.
Okay.
Thanks again, everyone. We will see you next week for Tactical Tuesday. Sandie, I will be in touch with you. Thank you.
You betcha. We'll get those questions answered. Okay.
Amazing.
Bye, everyone.
All right, Igniteds, we will see you over in Laser. We are running it just a little bit late, but that's okay. We'll see you guys over there and get all your questions answered. And we will see everyone for Tactical Tuesday next week. Next week, we have an Alberta landlord group. So lots of people are wondering about investing in Alberta. And I feel like the number one thing you need to learn when you're investing in some places is how to manage the tenants there. What is law? So this is a great group for you to be engaged with. So we'll have you guys next week and we'll see you all there. All right. Have a good night, everyone.